So with the parts cut for the bottom portion, we can do the layout of the drawers. Now I have that sketched out here, what I would like, which is 4 drawer openings. From the outside, they're going to look to be 7 inches, 6, 5, and 4 inches tall. The reason I say from the outside is because these are going to be drawers that have an applied front, the applied front being cut from the sculpted panel, and when that gets put on top, the bottom one will be 7 inches tall, although the drawer itself would be not quite as tall due to the pieces that are going to be going across forming the webbing. There's going to be a member that goes across here and here. We'll do the layout of this in just a moment. But this would be basically 7 inches from the bottom of this one to the center of this, and then from the center of this to the center of this will be the 6 and the 5. So we'll do the progression here and lay out where we want them on this member, and then I'll show you how we can do this on the MFT. Of course, we can do it like we did it on the upper portion, which is where I would use a square, and we can line that up and place the domino on here in order to place the mortises. But that's going to be kind of slow going, and of course it's going to rely on me placing this exactly the same on all 4 boards. What we're going to do instead is we're going to use some stop blocks on the MFT and then do it that way. It'll be a lot easier. Now from the front, this piece you're going to see it from the side actually. The width of it is going to be going towards the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to place one of the boards. Let's pretend that this is going to be the bottom member. This is going to form the bottom portion of the drawer. There's going to be a runner coming off the back here for that drawer, and of course this is just the front part. Very similar to what we did on the upper part. So what we're going to do is I'm going to place this down here, and now for a 7-inch drawer, actually let me switch this around so we can put the ruler here. If I put this down here on the bottom, we're going to assume that the center of this board is at the 1/2 inch mark. So let me go up to 7.5 inches, because I want 7 inches for this drawer, and I'm pretty much just going to center this board here. Now the next one up is 6, so we can go up to 13.5 on this one. And then we're going to go to 5, so 18.5. And then 4, so that's 22.5. Now this top one, I actually want it to be flat. And if it's at 22.5, that's actually going to work out just perfect with this 24-inch board. The reason why is that this top portion is going to form kind of a collar at the top of this stack of drawers. So the collar portion is going to be inserted up into the top portion of the vanity. And then effectively what's going to happen is that you have the sides that are already in there. This portion here will be slid up until it's positioned properly when we go to do the installation. And then we're going to take screws and screw it into the other side. Now, that's not the only thing holding this bottom part. This bottom part, the back members, are actually going to provide ample space for us to put a couple lag screws into the wall for doing actual physical mounting to the wall. So it's going to be perfectly well mounted all on its own, but this is going to be to do the attachment to the top to keep the two together. So I brought you in a little different angle so that you'll be able to see how this is going to go, because this is a great technique. These are the 4 that I need to put the domino mortises into, and this is the one that I've marked it all out. Now the bottom one is of course referenced off the bottom, so we're going to be flush to the bottom. That's very easy to do. There's a line here. This is the bottom of one of the members that I want to put across. There's one here and then one here. Now of course the top one is aligned with the top just going off the side. So we really only need to do these 3 plunges using this technique. This is the bottom, but what I want to do is, since I want to plunge a hole above this line, okay, for this technique I got to put it this way here, because what we're going to do is we're going to use the MFT fence. So I've got it back here. I'll push it up against my back fence. Let me drop this guide rail down. Now on here, I'm going to scoot this over. This is the back flat side of the fence. Okay, you don't want to use the rubber side. You're going to want to use this back flat side. I'm going to scoot it over until it's on the line. So now the line is basically cut by this guide rail. Now I can use this as my reference. So instead of using this triangle, I can use this entire guide rail. It's a much more strong surface. And then as far as my placement, in my case I'm going to be using these little round placers. If you happen to have one of the newer ones, you can use some of the multi-stops instead. So with this I would just slide it over until the little half round touches up against this member, slide it back until it hits this rail, and now that's my perfect plunge position. Now why do I say this is a better technique than using the triangle? The reason is I've got a stop flag on here. So now that I've placed this for this first one, I don't even have to mark these. I just have to drop this stop flag, slide it over, and lock it into position. Now the other 3 I can do by simply sliding over and then doing the plunge. And then we'll work our way through all these other holes. So let's go ahead and do that. thing I wanted to mention is that I took these boards here and I added a little L, what looks like a little L I drew on the end grain. When I do this assembly, you'll never be able to see what I wrote there. But what it is I drew a line down up near the top and along this side because this was a reference surface and this was a reference surface when I was doing the domino work. So this part here, of course, had the flat fence of the domino, and this side here had, or what would be, say, the pin, or in my case, I was using that little spacer. That way there, even though I was using a spacer for 1.5 inch wide stock, if this isn't exactly 1.5 inches wide, at least I know that this was my reference surface. So everything is going to have that same offset from the reference surface. So it's a good idea to do that. Sometimes I don't do that, and invariably I always pay for it. So one more thing to mention is actually a little on the embarrassing side, but it shows how you can go ahead and use some of this stock. This stock here took for a little bit of a warp. Now, of course, if you were to look at the two pieces with the bow end to end together, I mean, it looks really, really bad. They're not as bad as that looks. So what I did is when I cut these pieces, I intentionally put them so that the bow would go towards the inside, like you're seeing here. The reason being is that when this gets assembled and clamped up, the bow is going to naturally force into the rails and keep those nice and tight for us. They're not going to be fighting it. I mean, you could go ahead and try flattening it. It tends to be that when you're getting a long board, especially on anything that's a little bit figured, you're going to get a little bit of a curve. In this case here, this isn't a problem if I'm doing it on style like this. And so just so you don't think it's some strange camera thing you're seeing from there, yes, they are actually bowed. So the front and back portion of the bottom came out pretty nicely. Those have been glued up because now we're going to go and glue the portions that form the drawer guides and runners that go back front to back. Now those are going to be glued on the flat, similar to what we did up in the top portion. So they're going to be intersecting where there is already a joint. That's why these need to be all glued up and all ready to go before we plunge these mortises. Now just in passing, since we have this one with the two colors, you can see very clearly that the joints came out great even though this was slightly bowed because the bow was going into it. It actually helped with the clamping, and honestly the bow was pretty soft. It was very easy to flatten even with your finger. So now in placing the dominoes for this, one of the difficulties is, well, what do I have to register off of? There's no fence that I can put down because I'm trying to plunge right here at the intersection, so there's a vertical member here that's in the way. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to take advantage of that fact that the bottom is 10 millimeters from the center of the mortise again. We're going to take a small block, we're just going to clamp it to the bottom of here, or here, here, work our way up, and when it's clamped here, we're just going to take the domino and we're going to place it until the base is flush up against that bottom block, and then plunge for our mortise. Now the horizontal, the side-to-side placement is going to be dictated by this little spacer. So it'll make it very easy to plunge all these mortises here with a reference that's 10 millimeters up from the bottom surfaces to the center of the domino. And then we can simply do the same thing on the runners. Just 10 millimeters up from the bottom, and then that'll be our reference surface, and they'll be flush. So I have the dry assembly of the bottom portion all put together now. The fronts, of course, front and back are glued up, but these parts here, the runners that go back and the stretchers, those are all just pushed in. Now you can see it's actually pretty rigid on its own. This is no glue, no nails, nothing like that, and it's not sagging or moving at all. So, of course, once you get the glue in there, it'll even be better. But the thing that concerns me is that it's concerning me that we're going to have some rack later. I mean, you have drawers here that get pulled out, so if you have a drawer here that's nice and loaded, especially this really big one down on the bottom, and it gets pulled out 8 to 10 inches from the front, that's going to be a whole lot of torque on this whole rack. Now granted, the back is going to be bolted to the wall in different ways, so this whole back is solid. And then the front here, this is going to be attached to the top from the front, so that's going to keep the front from wanting to sag down, and then really all these members here will be solid. But I'm thinking that we can do something just a little bit more to make this even more solid. Now normally when you make a set of drawers like this, you're going to put a solid panel on the side, or solid wood or possibly plywood. If you're doing plywood, what's nice is it's dimensionally stable, so you could just put it here, and when it's attached to all these rails, and of course to the stiles, basically you would have to mechanically distort that whole piece of plywood in order for the torque to happen. So it makes it extremely strong for such a small investment in plywood. Now the question comes up, where do we put it? I've already made this so that all the outside edges are made out of mahogany because these all have a potential for being visible from the outside. Now I don't want to slap a piece of plywood over top of this, and then I cover all that up, and of course it changes a number of dimensions. You'll see it from the front. So what we want to do is we want to inset it. We want to actually put it here inside this frame, full size, exactly the size of this frame, so that it doesn't have any room to move. That's the point of it. We're trying to make it so it doesn't allow movement. But then we have these in the way. So now, I originally wanted to assemble this way, dry fit it, and I really thought that I was going to hold this up and it was going to sag, but unfortunately I guess it's not going to sag for me. So it kind of ruins the demo. But what I wanted to do is show you that we could defeat the sag by insetting these a 1/4 inch further inside so that we have room to put a piece of 1/4 inch ply inside this opening. So these drawer runners, whether they're a 1/4 inch further inside or not, makes no difference to the structure. It doesn't change any of the strength, especially because we're gaining so much strength by having the ply. So I'm going to take this apart. I'm going to remortise these 3 holes just to scoot them over a 1/4 inch. That's going to leave a small, basically 1/4 inch diameter hole extra on the side. It's nothing that's going to cause any problems, but this was the way I wanted to show the problem that just didn't surface for me. So I did want to put a small little filler here. I have my latest issue of Fine Woodworking magazine, and I mean, I guess if you want a freebie copy, here you go. Read fast, read fast, read fast. But what's key about this is a friend of mine is actually featured in the reader's gallery back here. If you go back to page 85, you'll see that Vic Hubbard's cradle is right down there. It's a great piece. He did a lot of work on it. He actually has a full blog article on there, and I'll give you the link in my blog article on this episode. But you can give that a look, and he did a lot of great, fantastic work on there with some curves and laminations and everything else. And surprisingly, it's his first project.